would not have been good.
No.
Y'all ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Call to order this business meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors. Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Stevens, if you'll call the roll.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Knoll?
Present.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
All present.
All right, we have several presentations this afternoon, which we are glad to do, but the sad part of this means that we have people that have been very valuable to this organization that are going on to their retirement, which we wish them well. But let me start with Orlana. If you'd like to come forward and introduce. And I'll come down now or wait?
I'll say a couple of words
All right.
and then you can come on down.
Great.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Board of Supervisor members, county staff, and the great residents of James City County. I stand before you to highlight the 35-year career of Veda McMullen. I've had the pleasure of working alongside her for 18 years and supervising her for the last 3 years. And I'm sure that Veda would want me to tell you that it is 35 years and 11 months to be exact upon retirement. And I share that because she truly loved James City County and she loved her job. Every year at anniversary time, she would bring in cake or donuts for us to celebrate her years of service here. When I think about Veda, I think about the quote that leadership is not about a title or a designation. Leadership is about impact. It's about influence, and it's about inspiration. And that's what Veda has done throughout her 35 years here with us. She's inspired me and other staff and just others throughout the county to be the best versions of ourselves. And that's starting with what we write on paper and what comes out of our mouths, because she was a master proofer, editor, and writer, and she always made us look good. Standing before you is James City County living history. She has a lot of firsts that you will, hear about. But the greatest thing about Veda is how she interacts with us day to day. She was here during the time she would share stories of the typewriter, the word processor, doing presentations of the overhead projector, and we would be in the hallway laughing because some of the younger workers won't even know what that even looks like. So Veda, I certainly thank you for the endless hours that you worked behind the scenes to make sure that Parks and Recreation shine bright before the public eyes. Your outstanding work, your passion and your work ethic are unmatched, and I haven't met many employees like you. I considered myself a pretty good writer, but until I met Veda, I consider her the master when it comes to writing and proofing. So thank you, and like I tell all retirees, you're always a part of our Parks and Rec family, and we always have a place for you to come home.
Thank you. Veda, would you like to say a few words, and then I'll come down and present this to you?
Thank you. Thank you to the board. Thank you to your predecessors. Thank you to county leadership. Thank you for the mission that we have and our strategic plan and our goals, and for setting the course and then letting us as employees run it with you. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Getting all choked up. I don't know if I can get through this. Whereas Veda McMullen has served the residents of James City County with distinction for the past 35 and 11 months, years, as a valued employee in various capacities. She began her career in August 1988 as communications assistant and also served as the communications video services coordinator in the communications division before transitioning to the Parks and Recreation Department and 2006 as the Senior Communication Specialist. And whereas throughout her 35-year tenure, Veda McMullen has exemplified the highest standards of professionalism, integrity, and commitment to excellence in public service. She was recognized as the 2011 Parks and Recreation Employee of the Year. We need to fix that. She was the creator and editor of the county's first citizens newsletter and creator of the county's first emergency hotline number for citizen information during emergency, and has produced thousands of publications and award-winning videos. And whereas Veda McMullen's institutional knowledge, problem-solving abilities, and tireless work ethic have contributed immensely to the effective operation and success. And whereas Veda McMullen has mentored and trained countless colleagues, serving as an inspiration and role model for others in public service. She was instrumental in shaping communications policy and best practices, navigating the department to winning numerous awards and ensuring that the department was represented in the most positive light. And whereas Veda McMullen's retirement on July 1st, 2024 will be a profound loss for James City County as we bid farewell to one of our most dedicated and esteemed public servants. She will be remembered fondly as a master proofreader and editor for her outstanding work leading communications, marketing, and public relations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Chair of the Board of Supervisors, on behalf of the residents of James City County, do hereby extend our deepest gratitude to Veda McMullen for her decades of exceptional service and commitment to our community. We wish her an enjoyable, fulfilling, and well-deserved retirement, and witness whereof I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the County of James City, Virginia, to be affixed this 25th day of June, 2024. Congratulations. Thank you and everything. And I'll get this fixed and we're gonna move on to you, but we'll get a picture. Parks and Rec staff is coming out. I gave you a copy of it here. She must not have. I feel a little guilty because I probably drove this poor woman to retirement in my numerous password issues. But Patrick, if you would like to come down and recognize Alisa.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Here this afternoon to recognize Alisa Fox, Assistant Director of Information Resources Management. Alisa started with the county in July of 1993, serving 30 years and 11 months with the county. Alisa actually started her career in customer service at Parks and Recreation. She soon after took a position supporting Parks and Recreation in their major software rec track and expanded to supporting all their technology needs in Parks and Recreation. Lisa then took a position over as a computer support technician in IRM, expanding her knowledge in customer service beyond Parks and Recs. In 2017, Alisa was promoted to Systems Administrator, overseeing the daily operations of our servers, user computers, data backup systems, and computer cyber protection. In 2021, Alisa was promoted to Assistant Director of IRM. Throughout Alisa's tenure at the county, her focus has always been customer service and dedication to staff. In Parks and Recreation, customer service was to patrons and staff and support of their mission. In IRM, customer support focused on support to county staff. From the newest employee to the most senior of staff member, Alisa was always there to help. Inside IRM, Alisa fills the role as advisor and leader for staff. Her accomplishments include many equipment replacement projects, software systems upgrades, central management of backups, virtualization of servers, and implementation of desktop support software, and many other projects that she managed throughout the years. Alisa's also served as our Chief Information Security Officer, keeping the systems safe and user safe. Two things you can always count on from Alisa are her willingness to help anyone and her insistence on finding a solution or an answer. We'll miss having her around the office, but also understand her desire to watch a sunset on some beach. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure working for you and with you and everyone in the county. I enjoyed it. I'm ready to move on now.
I did bring my laptop with me. I got a couple of issues I need to get rid of.
All right. Commendation honoring the service of Alisa Fox. Whereas Alisa Fox has served the residents of James City County with distinction for the past 30 years and 11 months. As a valued employee, she began her career in the Parks and Recreation Department as a customer service attendant and computer support specialist, then joined the Information Resources Management Department as a computer support technician, systems administrator, and assistant director. And whereas throughout her 30-year tenure, Alisa Fox has exemplified the highest standards of professionalism, integrity, and commitment to excellence in public service. And whereas Alisa Fox's institutional knowledge, problem-solving abilities, and tireless work ethic have contributed immensely to the effective operation and success of the Information Resources Management Department. And whereas Alisa Fox has mentored and trained countless colleagues, serving as an inspiration and role model for others in public service, and helped numerous Board of Supervisor members along the way. And whereas Alisa Fox's positive attitude, caring nature, and wonderful sense of humor have brightened the workplace and uplifted those around her. And whereas Alisa Fox's retirement on July 1st, 2024 will be a profound loss for James City County as we bid farewell to one of our most dedicated and esteemed public servants. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Chair of the Board of Supervisors, on behalf of the residents of James City County, do hereby extend our deepest gratitude to Alisa Fox for her decades of exceptional service and commitment to our community. We wish her an enjoyable, fulfilling, and well-deserved retirement. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the County of James City, Virginia, to be affixed this 25th day of June, 2024. Congratulations.
Thank you.
There you go. Let's take a picture. Oh, let's see. I was struggling. We have our historic commission chair, Mark, to present awards. While he's walking up, let me just say again that I want to thank their supervisors for the wonderful words they said, but both of those people have really contributed to James City County for many That's combined years. That's a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, and we are most grateful. So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Administrator Stevens, Chair Ms. Larson, and the other members of the Board of Supervisors. As the Chair of the Historic Commission, you all have seen me up here before, and you know that this is probably the biggest honor that I have in that position. I really enjoy working with the history of the county. We have a AMRA VA 250 program that's up and running now, working with tourism. So things are good with the history of the county. Our essay contest that we do annually, as you know, last year we had one winner. We didn't have a lot of respondents, and so this year I asked the commission to change it up. Let's not take this just to the James City County schools. Let's take this to the home schools, the private schools, and see what happens. And what happened was a really, really good thing, because two of our three top winners are homeschoolers. Our first place winner was a homeschooler, and our second place winner is from Lafayette High School. So I just wanted y'all to know that we've got more participation in this. So at this time, unfortunately, our second prize winner, Emily Reynolds, was not able to be with us at the last minute. She started not feeling well. So we do have our first prize winner, Aubrey Picata. Aubrey, can you come up and join me up here? Congratulations on writing a great essay. Thank you very much. This is fine. Thanks to the board for supporting us in this with our budget, so we can do this. Greatly appreciated.
Congratulations. Congratulations to you.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thanks for coming out today. We appreciate it. So, all right, that brings us to today's consent calendar, which consists of the following items. 1, annual architectural services. 2, business intelligence software contract renewal, Software House International. 3, contract award $607,388, Ware Creek Manor, Nay Court Stream Restoration. Grant award $7,328, Chesapeake Bay Restoration Fund Grant. Grant award $283,500, James City County Child Health Initiative. 6, memorandum of understanding between James City County and the James City Service Authority for Risk Management and Legal Services. 7, memorandum of understanding between James City County and the Williamsburg-James City County School Board for Risk Management Services. 8, minutes adoption. 9, opioid settlement funding, $208,698. Resolution of support for smart scale transportation funding application. 11, server and data storage hardware replacement, Dell Computers. Does anyone wish to pull an item? If
Move
not,
the adoption of the consent calendar.
thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel? Aye. Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower? Aye. Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
That brings us to board discussions, creating a separate pre-K through 12 school division feasibility study and transition plan. Mr. Stevens?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you know, the past year, we have been talking about what happens if we have a school separation, and we did enlist the services of Dr. Dave Gaston as our consultant to sort of help us through the process, had discussions with you throughout the year, and really working to develop a feasibility study and transition plan for our division should we become an independent school division. And so with that, I would turn it over to Dr. Gaston and let him present his report to you and see what kind of questions or comments you may have for him as he goes along. Dr. Gaston?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for that introduction. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Board of Supervisors, and citizens, it gives me great pleasure to stand before you today after a good 9 or 10 months of really hard work and digging deep into this major question that's before us of what happens next. So what I'm going to do today is kind of take you through some of the salient highlights of the report in all 105 glorious black and white pages. I really appreciate the opportunity to partner with the county to do this. We are very, very honored to have been asked to partner with you to produce this report and to take you through some of the information, the general highlights, probably a 30 or 20,000 foot view of kind of what's there. But I do encourage the citizens, as the report is released, to take some time to get the familiar points and the real granular areas of this report. It really does paint a pretty detailed picture of a lot of different possibilities and areas that could unfold as this topic is going to, I think, gather some steam as we move forward. So again, for tonight or for this afternoon, again, just kind of present a little background and a little bit of some of the findings that you see before you. A little history, and I know that we're all familiar with this, but we are a very unique school division. Not technically a consolidated division as most of the arrangements are. The last consolidation or most recent consolidation was last July when Allegheny County and Covington Forge united into a system. They're still getting off the ground and kind of formulating their own identity. But we are very unique in the sense that 70 years ago, roughly in 1955, a joint agreement combined the city of Williamsburg and the James City County school systems into one unit. And the localities share governance and operational services, fiscal operations, a lot of the administrative duties. It has a division superintendent to work with both localities, and it has a 7-member board consisting of 2 appointed members from the city, 5 elected members from the county. The shared services are very interesting because over the years of the 70 years of this agreement, it's been amended a lot. And so as this living document has kind of taken on its own character, many changes and many alterations to the document have carried it forward, which have allowed it to really survive that test of time. When you take a look at the system, you know, having worked in there for well over a decade, it's a pretty seamless operation. And it's responsible currently for educating over 11,000 students that we have in the combined systems across the 16 schools. When you take a look at the history of the situation that's before us, back in June of 23, the City Council of the City of Williamsburg really looked into the feasibility of what happens if we want to look at a separate school division, an independent school division. This is part of their operating plan, and they wanted to kind of take time to look at what this potentially could look like for the city. Costs involved, logistics involved. Basically, you're building an entire school division from the ground up. And so they contracted the services of a consultant to take them through that. That report was delivered in March of this past year. In July of 23, following that announcement from the city of the study, this body adopted a resolution to facilitate the termination of the WJCC joint agreement. That carries, I believe, to September of 25 as the target date for that to happen. Again, it kind of leaves on the table the possibility of the open idea of what could happen. I know that this board felt that with scant 13 months between that study and what could happen, the timeline's compressed a little bit in the sense of where does that leave the county? Where does that leave us as a partner to this joint agreement? This past September, you partnered with Gaston Educational Consulting, my firm, to be able to study and report on the logistics of what could happen if we have to transition the county to an independent school division. That brings us here today. So looking at where we are with this report, there were 3 major questions that we had to tackle. One is, what does this process really look like? How does it work? You know, we have a joint division with 70 years of history behind it. If we were to ever separate this agreement, what would happen? What would be the process? Who are the players involved? And what are the reasonable action steps that we could look to establish a separate division should this become a reality? And I have to caution and underscore, should this become a reality? Right at this point, the system is the same as it's been. It's a joint system. We're operating it basically as it is. But if that question were to be asked, where will we be? And these 3 questions really guided our research. But of course, as you get into any process and you start to uncover the mounds of documents and the history of all the things that have happened in the division, you start to get other questions that kind of come to the surface. And there were some additional inquiries that really arose out of this. And you can see them all here. I won't read them all, obviously, but And we want to know, what are the action steps? What are the fiscal implications? What are we looking at in terms of the possibility of hiring a new division superintendent? How does that look? What are all the logistics for a new school board if we have to go down that route? And also, too, there is the potential, as we will see from this report and in the presentation today, that it may not go forward as a separation. And so if that's the case, with the resolution on the table and some of the other features of a joint service that's out there right now, how would we renegotiate or approach a renegotiation for a joint services agreement? Because we know that that's a reality we may have to face in this process too. So we tried to cover a gamut of different options and things that could happen in this potential situation or this potential flow of operations. I want to put a couple of disclaimers out there with this report, because I think as the citizens do read this report, and again, I encourage them to spend some time with it, there are some things that I think we have to really put up front in terms of what this report represents and what it does not represent. Number one, plain and clear, this is not any way decided to provide data or anything that would support the actual separation of the school division. I think it's very clear in the intent and the language. We were tasked with the opportunity to look at the what if. So in the event that this does happen, what if? But we also left the door open for, if it doesn't, what could happen there too. So we really wanted to try to make sure that it was fair across a broad 360-degree spectrum. We also have to consider the fact that the language of the Code of Virginia, which is housed in section 22.1-25, it talks about the consolidation or the division of school divisions in the Commonwealth. That's the language from the law. It must be noted, though, that our joint service agreement brings together two separate, distinct localities in an arrangement as it was originally conceived in 1955. The vocabulary is a bit limited when you take a look at what happens. And so in the narrative process of writing this report, you're going to see terms such as deconsolidation, separation, decoupling, deconstructing. I think the word even divorce winds up in there at some point. But what you're going to see really is that these are interchangeable terms meant to basically mean a separation of a joint service agreement that is very unique to WJCC schools. So there are a lot of distinctions that we have to make, but this is, I think, a primary one in the sense of the essence of the actual legal agreement that's there. A couple of other disclaimers. It does not provide a detailed or projected fiscal analysis. I don't want to get into any anticipated cost savings or any projections. That might take a Ouija board, but when you take a look at what happens with surplus savings and detailed financial data, out of fairness, all of our data that we used was from the FY24 budget for the current school district or school division. If we have to project this process out to a target date, it could go as late as 2030. So trying to project what costs would look like 6 years from now is next to impossible. And I wouldn't ever want to go down that road because it could be misleading. Even in current dollars, we just don't know what the landscape's going to be even to the next year when we take a look at the current economic conditions. So we wanted to be very careful. It was not the original purpose of the study. It's not what the board asked. But make sure that it's understood that no financial projections are there simply because it's very difficult at best to do based on what the needs are going to be of our students each year and the budgets. The timelines also are potential moving targets, and we have to be very careful to put that out front as well. What we've given is a reasonable amount of time that we feel could work should everything go along as scheduled and as planned and as described. However, we all know what that process could entail. There are a lot of different players, a lot of different actors involved in this process, and as we know, as each one of them becomes more involved and each one of them imposes different things that they want to see and certain conditions are put into there, that could stretch timelines or it could compress timelines. We're not sure. So what we've given is what we think is a reasonable time frame, but if you do take a look at this, it is subject to change. And finally, I think that we all have to realize that this is the best prediction of the various steps that are there. All right. When you take a look at this, it's not necessarily going to be the actual process. We're not going to nail that to the wall, but we are going to say that this is pretty solid guidance. We understand that these are the projections that we could see as the stages there, as we extrapolate it from the Code of Virginia, from conversations and research that we've had with various organizations. So again, within reasonable expectations, this is what we could expect, but we also know that that can change and different stages of different things can change as we go along that way too, just like the timelines. So again, I just want to make that clear. It also really kind of takes us into what does this look like in terms of the process of separation. So if we take really kind of a look at the section 22.1-25 of the code, that right there is the entire process by which school divisions are created in the Commonwealth. And it's reasonable to expect that if we pull apart a joint system, if that becomes a reality, then we're going to have to start from the ground up in terms of reestablishing an entirely independent school division in James City County. The law states that no school division shall be divided or consolidated without the consent of the school board and the governing bodies of the county or city affected. So what we're looking at here is essentially a three-way agreement on the ground where the school board of WJCC, the supervisors for the James City County, and the city council for the city of Williamsburg would all have to be in agreement that termination would be something that is feasible, that they would want to forward that and go forward and posit that as a next move. That would be a formal vote that each of the bodies would have to take. Keep in mind, that termination vote does not come without a public hearing process and all of the required actions that go behind a vote of that magnitude. So there are going to be public hearings, public information sessions, things that are going to have to be held to basically ensure that this is representative of the locality's citizenry and the voting members. So the transition plan that you see before you is a roadmap, but once the public hearings are completed, once the boards make their decision, if they vote in favor of termination, each of the governing boards, the City of Williamsburg, James City County, put forth a developed plan, a transition plan that they feel would carry them through a projected timeline, which is essentially what we have here today. So when you take a look at the separating process or the separation process, if it's approved, a couple of different steps happen. So each of the localities puts their vote forth. A notice is provided forward to the State Superintendent for Public Instruction. The State Superintendent for Public Instruction has to receive that notification by January 1 of the year in which the composition of the school division is to be changed. The State Superintendent also notifies every member of the General Assembly at that time as well. Notice the date, January 1st, coincides with the session's start in that next year. So by January 1, the members of the General Assembly, all 140, have the notifications from the localities. The State Superintendent forwards it. The General Assembly can get involved in this process if they deem, and it may happen so because there are certain arrangements in local government on the city side that may have to be changed in some of the legislative process, not the county, but so much the city. So there are some considerations there that the General Assembly may have to take up in legislation. It's going to be incumbent, I think, upon both of the localities to be present in the General Assembly, to be able to tell the local delegation and inform them what's happening, to be able to carry the membership and to let them know what the devices and desires are of the localities and what the transition plan could look like, because that's going to all be, I think, on the minds of the legislators as they move forward. Keep in mind, we've not had a separation or a division or a deconsolidation in the Commonwealth of Virginia happen. It's not actually in the code. There is no law or legislation that says this is how you deconstruct a school district. There's only building it, consolidating it. It mentions division in the language, but there's no process about how that would actually unfold. This is relatively uncharted territory. Once the state superintendent has notified all the members, the Virginia Board of Education is going to take a look back at the Virginia Code. There are about 7 or 8 conditions that have to be met by the localities that must support a new school district. And so the Board of Education is going to review the conditions that each of the localities put forth in their plans, and they have to take a look at, will they be able to support the SOQs? Are they going to be able to adequately educate the children? Are they going to be able to take care of all of the operational needs and take care of the buildings and all the operational systems? Those are big questions that the state has to have answered. And so the Board of Education runs through the criteria, and if they find that all of those conditions can be met, they can approve the establishment of 2 new school divisions here in this locality. What they can also do is they can impose other conditions for deconsolidation as well, which could include timelines. So they may say, we are going to move ahead with all deliberate speed, and this is the time you're going to have to do it. And if you don't meet those conditions, then we're going to have a talk. So those are going to be some other things that they could impose down the road if that becomes a reality. So the structures, the timelines, everything that's established in the transition plans goes forward. And it's going to be interesting because the law or the Virginia Code also establishes separate code sections for how school boards are established as well. Now, James City County has a 5-member elected school board, staggered terms, modeled after the Board of Supervisors. It's been that way for forever. When you take a look at how the board operates, we've recommended in this study the petition, there's a separate petition that could be made from the county to the Virginia Board of Education to preserve the current structure of the JCC school board, at least keeping those 5 members whole, moving them forward for continuity and transition. There could be a good argument there for continuity to keep the transition smooth. The fact that you have some established leadership, you have terms that are already in progress. Again, it's kind of why fix it if it ain't broke? And so we want to take a look at how that works. And it's modeled after the way that the governance structures really work in the county anyway. So that's a recommendation that we can make for them to consider at the BBOE as a separate condition. We also have to take a look at some other considerations because depending on any impositions of conditions or timelines, there are going to have to be construction projects that are going to have to take all deliberate speed, most notably a new middle school and a possibility of a central office facility for the school board and the central office administration to be built as well. And so those are going to have to be plans that are going to have to be made. If a new school board is permitted to roll forward and given constitutional empowerment by the Board of Education, then that board could assume the leadership roles to begin the middle school constructions and central office construction progress, because that's usually where it emanates in most cases. If for some reason they impose a separate system where we have to choose a new school board, that's a separate process that's outlined in the report, but that could take a little bit of time. Given that time gap, the recommendation in the report gives the Board of Supervisors the ability, since you fund the capital projects from here, to begin the project and actually assume the project from its start. And then once that's completed or once the school board is seated, that then would remand to the school board to complete the process as well, since that's usually what happens with most of those processes. Those buildings are remanded to the school board. There are some fiscal implications that are outlined in the study. And when you take a look at those fiscal implications, again, not designed to sway anything, just things that we have to think about moving forward, because the budgeting is going to look a little different. Right now, we've based everything, like I said, in FY24. The budget is an interesting amalgam or combination of things because the city and the county are treated as 2 separate localities when it comes to calculations of LCI, local composite index, and when it comes to some of the allocations and the way that the money from the Board of Education and the General Assembly are allocated. So when you take a look at how this unfolds, the county and the city retain their LCIs, and the LCI adjustments are 0.5403 currently for the county. The city actually stands at 0.7426. It's a little bit of a difference there, and that's based on the ability of the localities to pay for their education. So basically what this says is that for every dollar that's spent for a student in JCC, 54 cents of that is taken by the county, the remainder is taken by the city. It's a formulaic piece that they look at. Real estate taxes, things like that, the real estate properties, the values, everything is calculated in that adjustment. That would not be anticipated probably to change moving forward because the county is the county. It carries everything in its favor, I think, for that. So honestly, we would not probably see a wild shift in that number for the county moving forward. There are going to be some shifts, though, in federal funding. If you take a look at all the title programs, Title I, II, III, IV, VI, I mean, there's all sorts of different programs for student support from the US DOE. Those will likely shift because, as you see in the demographic sections of the report, there are a lot of disparities between a lot of different conditions for students vis-a-vis at risk, vis-a-vis taking a look at ELL or ELA services, taking a look at special education, a lot of services that trickle down from the federal government. All of those funding formulas, once the divisions are established as separate entities, will have to be recalculated And that will give us a tremendously different picture of some of the budget with the federal funding that we have to encounter. There is a Virginia Initiative for Technology, VPSA. That's an allocation currently that we receive a combined total of $416,000. May not seem like a lot, but that funds education technology across the district or across the division. And it's a formula that's based on an allocation for the division and then separate allocations for each of the individual schools that are combined into that $416,000. We calculated out that the VPSE allocation will decrease to about $338,000, because keep in mind we would lose 3 school buildings in our division as a JCC independent school division to the city. So we take those 3 off the plate. That would just basically pinch the formula slightly down, and that's about where we would stand in today's dollars. That allocation is always moving. We also have to take a look at all of the valuation and the redistribution of tangible property. I put that box in the middle of this slide for a reason. That is going to be a major task because we have to basically account for every textbook, every piece of technology equipment, every desk, every chair, every bus, every tool, everything that we have basically in our school division as it stands right now, that we all share and that we all use. The good news is that the school division does a very good job of keeping tabs on that property. There are asset tags and inventories that we have to go through, and we went through a lot of inventories. There's a lot of material. But what has to happen in this process is essentially the city and the county would have to sit down at a table with a neutral third-party accountant, essentially, and they would have to basically assign real property values in market value dollars of each of those items, get a grand total, and then kind of figure out how that gets allocated according to the joint service agreement language from the past 70 years. I'll leave that on the table for a minute because it's a very complicated process. But it's going to involve a lot of back and forth, a lot of collaboration, a lot of coordination to this, and this could be a relatively long and lengthy process if we really take a look at this. And that's one thing that I think is going to be along that timeline area, something that we're going to have to build in if this becomes a reality, because that could take considerable amount of time. A lot of different back and forth and a lot of collaboration process that has to happen there. We also have to take a look at the construction costs. Currently, as the report states, a new middle school based on the footprint of Lois Hornsby Middle School will cost in today's dollars about $105 million to construct. And that's turnkey, soup to nuts. Roughly about a 3-year process, 3 to 4 years depending on timeline. So you can see the urgency about getting that started because as you can see by the report, there are well upwards of 500 to 600 middle school students that are going to be displaced with the move of Berkeley shifting to the city. And so we would have to find housing for those students and have to get that as a priority because we won't have a place to do it and the 2 current structures that would be left would not have the capacity to be able to handle that. Also a central office. The central office is part of the James Blair complex that sits in the city. So we would have to take a look at what staffing for roughly 100 to 140 new administrators would look like for a division this size for James City County. We would have to locate that, obviously build that office, and take a look at what those areas would be. And there are lots of different configurations. It may not necessarily be that. We could look at a lot of different ways of doing this, but we do have to take into account a central office for the school board and the administration. Other areas that are going to be recalibrated, the standards of quality. And it's interesting because if you take a look at all of the standards of quality funded positions, this is the minimum amount of positions that a school division needs to have to operate according to the state, minimum. So if you take a look at what that number looks like right now, the 1,000+ positions that are in that SOQ allocation are divided between the localities. So the city of Williamsburg takes some of the assistant principals, the county takes some of the principals, the division superintendent falls into one area, the assistant superintendents fall into the other areas. So they basically divide those between the city and the county so they at least have a placeholder in the budget of where they go, okay? The idea though is that if there is a division, those separations go away. And so we're gonna have to reallocate those SOQ positions, actually recalculate it first as to what each district or division would look like according to the state. And then the Virginia Department of Education is going to have to assign, obviously, a new value to that SOQ for each of the localities in the budget. So that's going to be a little bit of a process too that we're going to have to look at potentially with Department of Ed, working with Kent Dickey and the finance people to kind of figure out how that's going to look and what that's going to cost, because that will be minimum staffing needs for a new district. Also, the free and reduced lunch disbursements, those come from the federal government. Right now, currently, the free and reduced lunch reimbursements, if we were ever to separate them for each of the districts or each of the separate divisions, would look very different. And what would happen with those lunch reimbursements is they would have to be entirely recalculated based on new data. But keep in mind that the data is reported by each of the local school divisions, and the data lags 2 years behind current. So we would actually be working with data currently today from 2022 that's actually determining what our free and reduced lunch reimbursements are from the government. So that would have to have a little bit of a catch-up mechanism, and we would have to take a look at probably trend and historical data to be able to calculate that, just like the SOQs and some of the other things that the DOE would have to engage in. Finally, too, we have to take a look at things like rebranding costs. The county undertook a massive rebranding effort not too long ago. We took those costs and extrapolated some information. New signage is very expensive. Taking a look, luckily we wouldn't have to probably re-sign, or we'd have to re-sign, but look at radically changing a lot of what happens with the buildings. But you're also taking a look at business cards, letterhead, everything that basically goes in, new logos, all sorts of different things that would have to be considered. Those can be costly. And so those have to be built into the county budget as well if an independent school division is a reality. Staffing. This is a huge piece, and I point out in the process of this report that it is a process, it's not an event. It just doesn't happen overnight, because you have requirements from the state of Virginia or the Commonwealth of Virginia that set minimum standards for ratios of staffing at each of the school divisions. So the SOQs really guide a lot of the minimal staffing pieces. But then what we have to do is we have to take a look at the other layers of service and student need that are there and adjust the staffing up or down based on what the student needs are going to require and demand for each of the services. So instructional staffing has to look at those programming needs. We have to take a look at operational and support staff that are out there to look at the buildings, the maintenance. We are going to shed buses. Roughly about 20 to 25 buses would come off of the rail, but then we would have to look at where we staff it. Luckily, the garage and the operational systems are in the county, so we would make the advantage there of having the shop here. But the idea there is we would have to take a look at what would those maintenance needs look like and how would we staff that. It would radically change the capital improvement plan too, because the CIP, as you know, is a separate budget from the operational budget of the schools that we determine as well. So all that would have to be retooled and reconsidered, and the operational and support staff would have to be radically looked at and restaffed as well. The other thing that we have to look at is obviously the district and building administrative staffs. Each of the ratios that are set by the SOQs determine how many principals and assistant principals go into each building based on student numbers. But we also have to take a look at the central office staff as well. For this purpose of the study, we looked at what we would think would be comparable districts across Virginia. So in order to take a look at some of the staffing formulas and some of the staffing ratios, we looked at Montgomery County, we looked at Augusta, Fauquier, Rockingham, Culpeper, and Bedford. And so those really were comparable size, about 10,000 students, where we could potentially look at some opportunities to be able to mirror some projections and what they're staffing currently for future. And what that did was provided us with some roadmaps about even what would a new central office structure look like, how would an operational and organizational chart look. So that was really good data that we could pull from at least sister divisions across the state that we could really use as a comparison. The main event, student transitions, because this is all about the students. And I saved the best for last in this slide because this is where a considerable amount of discussion in the report is focused. When you are going to take a joint system of 70 years of history apart and look at the potential of what happens out there, this is going to be a well-orchestrated ballet between the two districts or between the two divisions that get established if that's the case. What we are positing is a process that would build a division and school transition team in each of the localities. Because what one does, the other does, because we are literally going to be taking county kids that exist in city schools and city kids that exist in county schools and moving jurisdictions. It's going to be a big process because, for instance, there are 281 city kids at Lafayette. There are 571 county kids at Berkeley. We have to move students in different places, and that's a massive movement of students in one shot. So this becomes a huge question in the separation question of what happens. We have to basically look at what's going to be to the best interest of the children. The division and school transition teams would coordinate with one another, and they would basically look at the administrative leadership. We would have members of each of the governing boards, the new school boards if possible, and the individual school leadership to basically work together to kind of figure out what on this large scale would this transition look like, because we're going to have big movement of kids. Individually, kind of closer to home, each school would develop a school success team. And those school success teams would work to advocate for the new students that they receive and that they provide to other schools. They would coordinate operations over the course of a year prior to the inaugural move of students to have open houses, to have opportunities to get them involved in the community, to basically make a warm and welcoming environment to get the children and the families excited about the move that's going to be coming to them. That move will be the result, as we posit in this report, of two separate redistricting processes in James City County. The word redistricting puts the hair up on everybody's back because it is very, very intricate, as we know. Nobody likes it. But that process is going to have to be a reality that we are going to have to face if this does happen. And if that does happen, we're going to have to look at the potential of two separate processes, one at the elementary level, which would lead, and the second at the secondary level, which would follow. And the reason why we've separated them out is because the intricacies and the demands of each of those processes are very different. It's not that one is better than the other or one has more value than the other. It's just that when you look at secondary redistricting, there are a lot of considerations such as athletics and a lot of other things that we have to look at for programs that we don't have necessarily at the elementary level. And so the processes are going to have to mirror one another. Plus, we also have to establish feeder patterns. A new middle school comes online. We're not sure exactly where that's going to get located yet in the county. So that could radically change district lines and all the different school attendance zones. And so we have to take a look at which elementary schools will feed into that new middle school and how will that division work. And so everything's going to have to be on the table with that process when it comes down to it. And we've made recommendations in the report as to how that could happen and what should transpire with that. The secondary transition is going to be a little bit of a nuance or tricky here. Two ideas that we have are, one, we set a target date and we say that on that target date, all systems go, everybody transitions at once, pre-K through 12. We just move everybody in one shot. Once all the redistricting is done, everything's there. It's kind of a rip the Band-Aid off approach in terms of how it works. But keep in mind that 2 years prior to that, we have the redistricting completed. The students and the families know where they're going to be headed. And the schools are going to be working with each of those families to basically give them a warm and welcoming environment to get them to where they need to be. So the transition's not going to be, we hope, as difficult. And we want to make sure that every student that moves has a success plan, a transition plan. They know where they're going, they know with whom they're going to be, and it's going to be a seamless operation from start to finish. The high school, a little different because there are a couple of different options. The problem we're going to run into, or the challenge with it, is that there's going to be some implications for staffing. So when you take a look at the transition at the high school, one idea is a phased option. So we would start in the inaugural year with the 9th graders, and they would move, and then the next year, 9th and 10th, and then the following year, 9, 10, 11, and then finally in a 4-year of the transition, or 4th year of the transition, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So it would be a phased operation over a 4-year period. But as it pointed out here, and as the report points out, that could extend the transition timeline to 2030 at the best. It's going to be a little bit longer, and it's also going to have a lot of staffing implications because the students that don't move are still going to have to be educated in those classes, and so those class sizes at the current 3 high schools could be very big. And we're not sure exactly how that's going to work in the staffing formulas until we know exactly who's in the cohorts and who's moving in those cohorts and what the numbers are going to look like. The building capacity will be okay because obviously we're moving students out. We'll have a little more room in the buildings as each of those classes filters back. But the idea there is, what is the staffing going to look like? Because we will have to satisfy the graduation requirements for each of those students as they matriculate. The other option that we have to take a look at is an option for rising juniors if we do the single inaugural year, of allowing them to stay on for an extra year to be able to graduate with their peers in their current class. That's a very popular option, I think, that we need to consider. And so that's posited as well into the report, that in the inaugural transition year, rising juniors would stay. They would still be able to participate in all of the extracurricular and athletic activities that are there, and they will be considered basically classmates until they graduate with their original class from the school that they desire to stay. So there's a lot of implications here, and we have to also take a look at, as the staffing moves, what happens to child nutrition services, what happens to specialty programs that are out there, all of the New Horizons educational programs, all of the other supplemental governor's school pieces that are there. All of that is going to have to be reconfigured and changed as well. And keep in mind that WJCC currently has property interests in some of those programs too. So we would have to, as part of that operation of separating costs, figure out where those costs are going to be housed in new independent divisions, because both localities benefit from those programs currently, and it's under a joint system that exists currently. So there are, again, some larger implications there that we have to take a look at. Athletics and co-curriculars, we do need to just kind of make a postscript note, because we are VHSL members. And as Virginia High School members, High School League members, as we know, we're organized into separate regions. And so currently our high schools compete in Class 3 and 4. Lafayette 3, Jamestown, and War Hill 4. When you take a look at the classes, they're based on the average daily membership. Between 587 and 1,200 constitutes what those two classes dictate, and that's for students in grades 9 through 11. Okay, so if you have enrollments of 587 to 1,200 in grades 9 through 11, that constitutes Class 3 or Class 4, which is where we currently sit. In conversations with the High School League and some research that we did, we know that we will likely remain in Bay Rivers District, so probably no shifts in terms of the competitive league we currently work with. And we would probably not see eligibility as well with any redistricting, because as students move, they will simply pick up at their new school wherever they left off and participate in those programs. So there would not be any interruption to students as they move. And I want to emphasize that point, because I think that's very important for a lot of parents in the sense of, and students, can they still participate? Yes, they can. The only thing that we know would preclude them is if they voluntarily wanted to ask or be moved to another school on their own recognizance, and that way in those transfers, they would have to wait a 365-day period according to VHSL. So that we can't get around. But for the most part, no disruptions we see to any of the co-curricular or athletic programs. Little focus in the report too, a lot of focus is on the joint service agreement. What happens if the localities don't agree? And they basically look at this and say, we don't really agree with the idea of separate school districts. We know we can do this as a unified division. We still need to continue on as a unified joint system. What we've advocated is that there should be a come to the table renegotiation of the joint service agreement. The last iteration is May of this year, of 2022. So we have a couple of years behind it, but we're going to be up for renewal at some point soon. And we take a look at the idea of, with everything happening, how can we make this agreement better? That's a big question I think we all have to ask ourselves. Our research carried us to take a look at all of the consolidated systems that are out there. But again, we're not a consolidated system, we're a joint system. The closest that we could find in the report is the City and County of Fairfax as a case study. So we looked at the agreement that exists between these two localities. It's an interesting agreement. It was drawn up not too long after James City County and Williamsburg joined in 1955. 1961, the City and the County of Fairfax were established as separate jurisdictions by the courts. The City of Fairfax is actually the county seat for the County of Fairfax, but they existed as two separate localities, and an agreement for the school systems, the joint school systems, came out of that. The City of Fairfax, roughly 25,000 citizens. The County of Fairfax, we all know the size and the scale of the County of Fairfax, but these two districts or divisions decided to go into a joint arrangement or a consolidated arrangement, very distinct in terms of how it unfolds. That agreement has only, unlike our joint agreement, gone through one major amendment period in 1978. It is a very close comparison in scale. Again, keeping in mind the County of Fairfax has a $3 billion with a B budget for their school division. We see the city of Fairfax at roughly 66 million. So there's a little bit of economies of scale there. There are 4 buildings that exist in the city of Fairfax, about 2,800 students, about twice the number that would be in a city of Williamsburg system. But when you take a look at how the costs are divided, the language is there, it's very detailed in a lot of areas. And so it's worth definitely a look as we could potentially go down this route of how we may want to model a new agreement to be very specific in some respects and take the mystery out of a lot of what we're dealing with right now as we've uncovered in kind of some of this information. But also take a look at some of the vagueness that's in that report, because the vagueness and some of the questions that are left open for the 2 localities to decide make it work. It really forces collaboration. It really gives them the ability to come together. And they have essential agreements that are actually built around that joint agreement that dictate when they meet, regular meetings, there's liaisons. The city has a separate school board, the county has a separate school board, and there's a lot of overlap in terms of how they work. So it's a very interesting piece to take a look at, and I encourage everybody to enjoy that read, because there are some things there I think that we might want to take note. Why is it important? Well, from that and from a couple of other ideas, looking at the current joint agreement, concrete measurable terms are in the agreement, and I think we need to take a closer look at that. What are the total costs? What are the properties that we're going to have to consider? The resources, the tangible properties, the anticipated costs. All of that is outlined in the city and the county of Fairfax. And I think for us, it becomes one of those pieces where in a joint agreement, we could nail that down a lot easier and make it more specific to get the metrics out front. It takes the guesswork out of something that happens in a case of what we're talking about right now. It also takes the guesswork in current budget in the actual relationship, because every year the city of Fairfax knows exactly what it's going to owe, and the county knows exactly what it's going to have to put together. And there's no mystery, because the tax-paying citizens in the city of Fairfax are actually breathing a sigh of relief every year, because they know this is what we're going to have. And the tax rates in the city of Fairfax, $1.14 to the 100. For Northern Virginia, that's pretty low, lower than a lot of localities even in Hampton Roads, if you take a look at the tax rates. So again, something to consider. There is a determined termination period that's in the agreement between the Fairfax localities. It says that if there is a termination, 3 years. So it sets a target, and they've determined that to be the time that they would need to calculate all the costs of separation. So that gives them breathing space so that we're not having one locality say this and one locality say that, and it comes back as it's in the agreement. The idea there, like I said, is there are some places where there are open ends. And so the idea there is that there's a lot of dialogue. If there's disagreement, they come together, they talk. Our localities do a good job of that. I will say that we have open lines of communication between localities. Please don't get me wrong on that. But the idea there is that the intentional vagueness forces collaboration in some instances where there may be some disagreement, and emphasizes that regular communication that they have to have. And it gives, like I said, some strong certainty in areas of the budget and capital expenditures where they know, and the localities know exactly what they're responsible for every year too. So that could be very interesting in the sense that as a model, we might be able to take some lessons and learn from that in the renegotiation. So what are our next steps for James City County? Obviously, the report gets released today, and I'm very happy to feel like I'm kind of giving my child over to the wild here. This is a wonderful thing, but it's really good to be able to hand this report to you officially, and to allow the citizens to be able to cogitate on it a bit. We're looking potentially, I know the Board of Supervisors has talked about public information and listening sessions through the next few months to basically open up forums and open up some lines of communication. What does this study say? What does it not say? And to give consistent and really reliable information across these experiences to the public, to be able to give them the ability to start to think about what this could be. There are focus group experiences that would be built into the process as well. Public information sessions are great for the general body of listening, but when you take a look at the intensities and some of the emotions behind it, focus groups on a smaller scale with a cross-section of stakeholders and citizens can really get to the heart of how intense are these responses? How do people really feel about an idea of two separate school divisions in our locality? How would they feel about a James City County school division operating on its own? I think those are questions that we need to kind of dig a little deeper on, and that would be something that would be a great next step to recommend to the board as well. A stakeholder survey would also capture those intensities and some of those responses. It would not be a do you agree or don't you agree, but it would be a simple 5 or 8 question stakeholder survey we could push out to gauge some of the general reaction of the public in terms of up or down, where would you see this going, and are there some things that we are not thinking about here that we need to consider? I think those are very important. And finally, what would happen in this process is that by November, all this data would be processed and put together to present to the Board of Supervisors as a report. Where do the citizens stand? Now, this does not obviously take the place of a public hearing. It doesn't take the place of a formal vote. But the idea there is to kind of gauge where's the public will. Now, is this something that we really need to seriously consider? Or do we need to go back to the possibility of looking at a renegotiation? So it gives the board a little bit of an idea of where the fork in the road could go. And then after that, if the move is wildly in support with the public and the public hearing produces an idea that termination is the route, that's one thing. If it's not, then we have the spring to be able to look at that joint service agreement and say, okay, what do we need to do? I really emphasize the negotiation process, if it comes to a new joint service agreement, to begin as early as possible. The reason being, there's a lot of fiscal implication in that joint service agreement that will adversely or positively affect the next school budget. And so we have to take a look at how those allocations unfold, because if we're going to be getting into the specifics and the mechanics of property values and where things are going to be assigned or go and what the values are, and any type of operational pieces that have to be put in there, that could affect the budget. And as that operating budget is developed, as we all know, the budget gun goes off in January with the General Assembly, and then we have to get those budgets out into April, May for approval by June. That's a short time frame. And so looking at a renegotiation process through the spring, for us, would be recommended short term, because we would need to have that information determined, agreed, signed. The school board would have to take a look at it, obviously, give some input to that process as well as the citizens, and then that would come back in June to a formal agreement that would coincide with the budget process and the finalizing of the budgets for the schools. It sounds complicated, because it is. There's going to be a lot of moving parts and a lot of individuals involved in that process of negotiation, whether it's the valuation of real property or whether it's going to be something else. We have to take a look at those contingencies. Again, I want to thank you all. There are some tremendous acknowledgments at the start of the report, and I really cannot underscore those acknowledgments enough. From the thoughtful questions that we received from each of the 5 members of this body, the really, really hard work, support, and effort of the county administration. Mr. Stevens and his staff have been exceptional. And the staff and support administration for Dr. Herron and WJCC, the data has just been abundant. And so no stone was really left unturned in a lot of this, because there was just a lot to look at. And a lot of things that we've learned along the way that are lessons we also point out in this report as well, that I think we need to take forward and take a look at where we could go. We get better, I think, through looking at these areas of disparity, or these areas where we may need to be honest with ourselves and move forward. So with that, I thank you, and I open up any questions that you may have with regard to the report.
Thank you. Questions? Okay.
Let me just say one thing. First of all, thank you for the report, and I commend it to the citizens of the county and the city, because it has a lot of information about process, and I think they'll find it to be very different from the report that the city's consultants did, which was more focused on the issues of performance of City of Williamsburg residents versus county residents. This is really about a process that doesn't really exist. But I especially appreciated getting an understanding of the factors that are taken into account by the Board of Education by code when there's a proposal to merge school systems. Because as you suggest, those are likely to be factors that the Board of Education will be looking at in terms of separation. So I think that all provides some very useful help. The real challenge that we face right now, I think, is simply one that we are in a limbo that makes it exceptionally difficult on our school system to know what to do and for us to understand exactly how to proceed. So it's my fervent hope that we will be able to get a resolution to the question of where we go from here in the short term, and I think this report will help us with that
Thank you.
process. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McMullen.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for the report and just do a couple of reminders that you've also done. One, because we've not been through this process, we did ask that when this was first, when the city first informed us that they were looking at creating their own school system, we realized that we did need to get ourselves in a position of understanding the process, which is what we are doing. And we have something further in our agenda today that is going to put us to the next step because, as Supervisor McGlennon says, we are in limbo. And so we do need to proceed so that we are fully aware and that we are putting some processes in place should we hear back. Which we hope that we do from our colleagues. I don't want anyone in James City County or the city of Williamsburg for that matter to think that in any way this education is not meaningful to the citizens of James City County. I think we have shown through our support of our school system that we very much value education. We value our school system and we want the very best for all students. But we are, what we are charged with are the county citizens and those students. So that is what we are going to be continuing to work on as we work on this part of the process. I appreciate the several times you talked about a joint system because we do not know. This is somewhat of unknown territory to us because we are two separate school divisions that have operated jointly as during the time period that you have mentioned. And so we are really in some territory that we're not really sure about what's going to happen should it come down to separating that. And then I think you've also talked about the fact that we will start with our doing some public meetings this fall. So I urge citizens to come out to those. So thank you very much. And I think we're going to see you in a little bit.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. That brings us to Parks and Recreation CIP discussion. Mr. Stevens.
Chair Larson, members of the board, we've had some ongoing conversation about board's more involvement and discussion of CIP projects. When I looked at our budgeting process this year and all of the requests from Parks and Recreation, there's a lot of things coming forward. And so I really thought as we're getting into awarding a Marina contract that could end up at the end of it being a $8, $10, or $13 million kind of expenditure come this fall as we get into the design of the Marina improvements. To me, it seemed to be a good time to bring our Parks and Rec staff in to talk a little bit about their CIP projects in particular. And as part of the budget meetings we held this spring, I heard an awful lot about community wants and needs. I would argue there's a part of Parks and Rec that definitely is needed, but people have different views of how much. And so I think this community has done a great job of serving that part in our community, but they generally are not something that generates enough money to pay for themselves. When you build a park, it is a real community amenity, there's real value, but it's hard to get a return. And so that's one of those things that if people argue we should or shouldn't do, I thought it was better for us to have some non-rush, time-driven conversation and let you start the process thinking about that today. And if you have specific direction or just want to wait a few weeks or months and let us talk about it again with you, we'd be happy to do that. So Alistair Perkins put together I say a short presentation. There weren't many slides, so I think it's short. As he begins that, I'm going to distribute it to you just so if you want to make notes, you do have something to write on, and you can maybe keep up and have questions as he goes along or for discussion at the end. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alistair.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, Ms. Larson, members of the board. Like Scott mentioned, not many slides, but quite a bit of information in here. So I'll try to keep it moving. So let's see, get this started here. So what I'm presenting here to you today is kind of a snapshot of where we are today. So that's current projects that have already been funded that are in process. It's the 5-year adopted Parks and Recreation CIP that was just in this most recent budget. It's some of the items that we're projecting out for our 5 to 10 year. And then it's got some other projects that have been discussed but haven't shown up in these budgets in the past. And at the very end, a quick slide on some of our capital maintenance projects. So to get us started here with our current projects, these are the ones that are already funded. I'm just going to give a brief kind of description. But we have design funding for the War Hill Sports Complex, baseball and softball complex. That project is pending right now, and as we get to the next slide, we'll see that construction of that project was moved out to FY29. So at this time, we are considering how to best use these funds, knowing that that project is a little far out to design today with the technologies that can change, the needs that can change, and where the best use of that is. Next, we have the Chickahominy Riverfront Park paddlecraft and rowing area. That's the design of ADA accessible paddlecraft and rowing area, restrooms, additional parking to support the existing rowing operations that are currently we have the College of William and Mary and the Williamsburg Boat Club that run competitive rowing clubs out of that area of the park, and additionally to operate our park paddlecraft rentals and paddlecraft launches out on the Gordon Creek side of that park. To date, we already have a conceptual plan of this area, and these funds that we have today are for the design of that area. Next, we have the Chickahominy Riverfront Park pool concession and septic area. That project was funded back in FY22. It ultimately, we were underfunded for what we wanted to do out there, especially with the septic drain field area, and that project ended up being deferred. Funds for that project went to support the completion of the first phase of Marina improvements and the Chickahominy RV storage area. We have funding for the acquisition of a park in the lower part of the county, and that's pending identifying property there. We have the funds for the Upper County Park multi-use trail, so about 1/3 of a mile paved multi-use loop at Upper County Park. That project has been designed, the site plan has been approved, and we anticipate construction of that project this fall. And then we have 3 separate accounts that represent the funding we have today for the James City County Marina improvements. And that includes things we've talked about before here, but the parking, the stormwater, dredging the marina basin, additional boat slips, a bathhouse, and a relocated boat ramp, and really to finish off that area. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we have today. There's 2 things on here that I didn't mention, or that I don't show here, but that I'll mention when we get to this next slide. So this next slide is our adopted budget. These are our capital projects in this most recent budget. Starting with the Lower County Park that we mentioned the acquisition for before, we have funding for design and construction in FY27 and 28. The next is that Chickahominy Riverfront Park paddlecraft area. So you'll see we have funding in 2 years, FY27 and 28. That $900,000 in FY27 was originally requested in FY25, and that is really just to do the infrastructure, the parking, the restrooms, and the stormwater related to that. Currently, these groups are operating. William and Mary built a boathouse out there. The Williamsburg Boat Club is willing and ready to invest in their own boathouse out in that area, but without suitable restrooms, parking, stormwater, that sort of thing, they won't be able to move forward with that until we're able to kind of support that. So that's that $900,000. The $1.3 million were for the waterfront improvements down there. The next project is Veterans Park Phase 2. The original scope of that project included additional parking, stormwater, utilities, and a splash pad spray ground um, feature. That request was reduced from 2 million to 1,036,000. So at this time, we're continuing with the parking, the utilities, the stormwater, but that splash pad component you'll see show up when we get to the next slide here. The next is the skate park, currently located at the James City County Recreation Center. As you may know, that amenity will be removed when the county government complex is built. So we've been working with our skateboarding groups. Our intention is to move and build a new skate park at the War Hill Sports Complex site. That first figure, the 150,000 in FY27, is for design, and then the $1 million is for construction. That was another one that we were looking at maybe doing a little sooner, but it would really, we'd want that to kind of go with the timeline of the county government complex. Next, we have Green Springs Trailhead restrooms. This one is just to build a permanent restroom facility at the trailhead of the Green Springs Trail, and that is in FY26. The Chickahominy Riverfront Park multi-use trail would be a paved multi-use trail that connects the Virginia Capitol Trail along where the new fishing pier was built and straight up the Chickahominy shoreline all the way to the point where the mouth of Gordon Creek meets the Chickahominy River, and make that connection, picnic area, and paved walking path and biking path there. Next we have the War Hill Sports Complex, softball, baseball that I mentioned before, and as you can see, those construction funds are in FY29. And then lastly, I'll kind of lump these together, the Jamestown Beach Event Park improvements, which would be the development of that Jamestown Beach Event Park master plan. That 1.6 million is design. You'll see the construction show up in the next slide. And then another multi-use field, so a rectangular field expansion at the War Hill Sports Complex for 4 additional synthetic turf fields. And again, this is for the design. The construction will show up in the 5 to 10 year. And then lastly, these are what we kind of project out as 5 to 10 year projects. So these are based on our approved park master plans and previous CIP requests. One thing I wanted to kind of take a pause and mention is that we, in the next year or two, will be updating our department-wide master plan. And a lot of these priorities, it'll give us a great opportunity to look at these priorities, reset these priorities, hear from the public. These master plans, our last one was updated in 2017, but they include equity mapping to show where certain regions of the county that may be lacking a certain amenity. They also look at level of service standards, comparing us nationally with other similar localities of our size and where we stand in terms of number of rectangular fields or mileage of trails or that sort of thing. So we do have a great opportunity coming up where we're going to update that department-wide master plan, and that will kind of guide a lot of these rankings here. But these are the items that aren't on the current 5-year, and so we have the development of that Upper County Park splash pad. So that was a request for FY25, and we do currently have $135,000 for design of that facility. That would be a splash pad facility similar to the one at Chickahominy Riverfront Park, and it would replace an existing toddler pool, baby pool at that location that has kind of outlived its useful life. It's frequently under repair. That would replace that amenity. The second is the Veterans Park, the splash pad component of that project. Again, we're showing it now in the 5 to 10 since it doesn't appear in the 5-year. Again, we do have design money for this project as well, $335,000 that we have at this time for design of that. Additionally, we have the pool concession building and septic that I mentioned previously, the construction for the remaining Jamestown Beach Event Park improvements, the construction for the rectangular field expansion at the War Hill Sports Complex, the development of Brickyard Landing Park based on the recently approved Brickyard Landing Park master plan. A roadway at Chickahominy Riverfront Park to divert traffic from the entrance to the park around the campground for users of the RV storage facility, users of the rowing and paddlecraft area. We have some improvements out at Chickahominy Riverfront Park to include a new full hookup RV loop, bathhouse, the active recreation area from the Freedom Park Master Plan, which would include playground, active recreation facilities kind of near the entrance to the park, basketball, tennis courts, splash pad, pool, parking, storage, restrooms, as shown on that master plan. And then the development of the War Hill Sports Complex Connector Road, the existing service road that is open, of building that up to VDOT standards and having it adopted in the state secondary road system. Those were those items that we had on the 5 to 10 year. And then lastly, we have other projects that have been discussed, and some are things that are probably way out. Some are things that are maybe a little more current. But just to quickly go down the list of the 757 swim locker room expansion, so potentially helping 757 swim with expanding those locker rooms to be able to support the existing operation that's going on now, as well as larger swim meets. An outdoor heated competitive swimming pool. We have money in our budget this year to do a feasibility study on that. A competitive swimming pool is something we've talked about for quite some time, and we've done feasibility studies going back to 2000, again in 2010 on that. Pickleball courts. As we all know, the Veterans Park pickleball courts are very well used. We have pickleball courts on the War Hill Sports Complex Master Plan and also on the Upper County Park Master Plan. So the development of some more pickleball courts. The potential of some sort of public-private partnership for something like dry stack storage at the Marina, cabins as they're shown on the Jamestown Beach Event Park Master Plan, or the Ambler House. And then I included some other master plan items that from those park master plans that weren't included on that last slide, which are the upgraded campground store, bathhouses, and pavilions at Chickahominy Riverfront Park, the gymnasium shown on the Upper County Park Master Plan, and the baseball softball stadium shown on the War Hill Sports Complex Master Plan. So that was quite a bit. I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot the maintenance projects. These are just the big maintenance projects that are in the Parks and Recreation budget and the larger projects from the General Services budget. General Services has, quite a bit of other projects that they do in Parks and Rec facilities, but I just wanted to show kind of the big items here. The ones that are coming up currently are the office renovation at the James City County Recreation Center, some paving out at Chickahominy, Brickyard Landing improvements. To date, we've done some improvements to the parking. This could include improvements to the existing boat ramp, permitting and that sort of thing. Some routine maintenance on the Upper County Park pool surface. The water distribution lines at Chickahominy Riverfront Park that are going hand in hand with the current well replacement out there, and the playground replacements that are going on at multiple parks. And as you can see, we have quite a few other maintenance projects that go out there. So like I said, that was quite a lot, so I'm happy to answer any questions. Our Parks and Rec Director, John Carnifax, is here as well.
Mayor, Board, if I could just, Mr. Chair, members of the board, could I add just a little bit to that? I do want to say, I think Alistair's done a really good job in presenting what is out there. And just as a reminder for our residents, when he shows these capital improvement plans in FY 25 to 29, the only year you've approved funding for is 25. The only years we have a plan for are these first 5 years. So we do have a funding plan in place where our finance director believes we can afford to do these projects if they move forward year to year as you approve the budgets each year. And those total in the maintenance and the capital improvement, 17, almost $24 million for just Parks and Rec over the next 5 years is planned, not approved, but planned. Alistair gave you another list of the 5 to 10 year projects, which is another $45 million, which we don't have a plan on how to fund that yet. As they roll in, that will become part of the budgeting process and how we have a plan to move those forward. And then the other projects he didn't list, but in terms of dollars, but we have estimates on them, and there are probably another $20 million of things that are potentials out there. So I do think from a standpoint of just talking about it, it's a really good time for us to sort of have your input on priorities and where you would like us to go, or is there a different direction? Because I think they're all good things, and they're things that our department didn't really create. They have heard that from our residents as they interact with them of these are the things they would like to see. And so with that, I will turn it over to any questions you may have for Alistair or other members. John's got a pretty good team assembled behind Alistair, so we ought to be able to answer your questions or at least come close today.
So I'll start with Supervisor Eisenhower.
I've got basically two questions. And one is, right on the first page, first slide at the bottom, the Chickahominy River, the JCC Marina. And all this is in process. This basically is the marina itself, the dredging, when they talk infrastructure in phase 2, does that include the boat slips and all of that?
That's
correct?
yes, sir. That's what that project includes, and that is the funding we have today.
Okay,
So-
and the reason I point that out is we've got like $1 million in infrastructure, and phase 2, 5.2 or $5.3 million worth, and it's all ARPA money. And so I know that there are some timeline constraints as to when that money has to be committed and when it has to be expended.
Yes.
And the concern is making sure that we utilize all of that money in a timely manner. I'm looking to essentially a little reassurance that we are pretty much on track to be able to use this money for these major projects that otherwise would have had to come out of our local budget. So that's pretty well on track for being completed under the constraints of the ARPA funding.
And Mr. Eisenhower, don't let me put Alistair in a place. The intent was, yes, we would have this project for the ARPA money. In talking with our FMS director, Sharon McCarthy, we will have the money committed, period, so it doesn't go back.
Okay.
The funding requirement was, we have part of the funding was the design we are asking you to award today would lead to a contract award in December or before that would then have that money obligated as required. My concern, and I'll make up the numbers a little bit, but what has been a $6 million project is now an $8 million project, maybe a $12 million project. And we may get to the end of this as we get a design done and not be able to award it, and it takes us some more time to figure out what we really do to award as we try to reduce those costs. And so I am worried that this project, while design should be completed by the fall, may not get awarded before the end of the year. But we have talked about ensuring this money does not get returned or unspent here. We will have it spent in James City County, and it may be that another project that is underway or has been completed qualifies for that funding.
Okay.
And Ms. McCarthy and I have talked about that at length, and she feels very comfortable we will not return any of the ARPA money.
Okay, I just want to be reassured that we could shuffle the deck chairs to make sure that we didn't lose that money. Because it's, our intent is to use it for this program, but I want to make sure that we have it. The second question I have is, the overall figures you were mentioning there about the 5 to 10 year or the other projects, that's a considerable amount of money out in the distance. And yet these are things that we hear from our citizens that they really want. And so I'm wondering, and this is just off the wall, but has any consideration ever been given to doing like we did with the open space, where we said, look, we want to do these types of things, but in order to do it, we would need to do some funding or some bonding or whatever, and to see if our citizens were interested in supporting something like that, because it's one of those that there's just no way in the resources we have right now that we can do effectively all of that stuff that you've got out there for 10 to 15 years, and yet some of it our citizens might really, really be interested in. So I think, to speak to what you were talking about, is what are the priorities? What's most important to our citizens, and how could we get what we want for them? And they may have to weigh in and say, yeah, we're willing to say that, this is a mechanism or funding that we might be able to use.
Mr. Eisenhower, I know in the past, and Parks and Rec staff and Alistair might be able to speak to it better, I know we've had bonds out there for Parks and Rec projects specifically. So yes, you could do it that way. It is still debt service to pay back. So it goes out with the idea that, hey, this is the cost to us, and if you want to do them, it's at this cost on the tax rate, and you ask for a vote to have those funds. And so yes, the answer is we could do that. I think the difficulty will be, of this list, it's a pretty big list, it's hard to pull all of those into a question. So I think you'd need to decide, based on maybe some community input and the board's discussion, what are the 5 or 6 or 10 most important ones, or maybe the most expensive, or whatever that turns out to be. So you're asking the right question as you go to our residents to ask, do they want to support these?
I think that's a very good point you raised, and I think that that's the kind of information I think we would need to have if we're going to be looking at that. So getting that public feedback on that would be important for the board, I think.
Can I just ask a question about the budget overall, which is, we made a determination to take some unassigned fund balance in order to soften the impact of reassessments this year. And it was your advice and guidance that we remove some of the planned expenditures of that money. So, for instance, we took out the 1% or the 1 cent equivalent for the purchase of development rights, and pushed it and said we wouldn't implement it this year, we wouldn't do it this year. We would do it next year. Once again, resume the process. Depending on the status of the end of fiscal year, is there any opportunity for us to restore some of the decisions or some of the reductions that had to be made in the current budget?
I think the short answer is yes. And again, we took almost $2.5–3 million from the school CIP and an equivalent amount from our CIP to get to that offsetting credit that we're proposed to do this fall. So 2 of these projects are on Parks and Rec. This I guess the slide he's got up, the $800,000 for the splash pad, and Alice, if I'm incorrect, please correct me, and also the Veterans Park Phase 2. Those were both in the FY25 CIP that we took out. My recommendation would be we'll rebalance those as they come forward next year. We were just late enough in the budget process. As you get into that 5-year CIP, it is not a 5-minute just move things around. It is making sure we can fund. We did not change anything recommended in the funding plan for 26, 27, 28, or 29. I would expect these will float back into the 26, 27 timeframe, or if our discussion now and into the next month sends it a different direction, maybe they stay in the 5 to 10 year plan. And I've said the same thing to our school superintendent, where they had several projects that they felt like these were important enough to do in FY25, and now they've just disappeared. Well, they don't have to move to FY30 necessarily, but as you come back into the funding plan for 26, 27 next year, we could reprioritize those projects as well. To your point, if we ended the year in 24 with a surplus, could you refund those? You could, and that is a discussion we can have, and I will have at least have a preliminary number today that is close to what it would take to refund those. We'll have a final number come September timeframe, and if you wanted to fund those mid-year, you certainly would have that option to consider.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for this very informative presentation. Full disclosure, I have heard from several people concerning the War Hill baseball, softball, disappointed that it has been moved to 2029. It is a very well-used, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's a very well-used facility. I also am a big believer that we need softball out there. I think we have not, I think we should be having a softball for the women that want to play. And so, but I realize this is a huge list. Did just want to mention, because you brought up the 757 swim locker room expansion, they reached out to us about that, I think a couple of years ago. They, part of their lease agreement is the high school's practice there. And so, which cost them in chemicals and other things. And so that is why they came to the county, because right now their locker rooms cannot facilitate, I do not believe, having the high school students change there in the mornings. Is that correct?
I'm not 100% sure. I believe so, but I do know that would be part of this, that we'd be able to accommodate more local swim meets and high school swim there.
I just did not want citizens to think that they were coming to us to help fund something that that part of the reason that they were coming to us was because of the high schools that they are, they do all 3 practices for the, well, I don't know, Lafayette, go to Kingswood or come to 757 still? I'm not sure, but they, at least War Hill and Jamestown do practice at 757. So,
And Ms. Larson, to your point, if they didn't do it, I think you'd have an increased demand where we'd be trying to figure out how to build another pool and meet that demand. So I do think that partnership has helped save us as the county money on those facilities. Even if we participate some, I think you still get value for the money you put into it that serves the community and our students here and swimmers in the area.
right. So I didn't, I just, it was very important, especially to mention War Hill Sports. And this is an extremely large list. We are so fortunate, all the work that you all do in Parks and we have beautiful Parks and Rec facilities. And to my colleague's point, our citizens have come to expect that and they want expansion. I do think we have to find a way to have input, to figure out where the priority needs to be. I realize staff and their expertise, but I think when you have a list of this magnitude, I think you do have to you have to bring in your citizenry and have a real conversation about how do we want to pay for it moving forward. So, but thank you so much for coming out and making the presentation. It's appreciated.
And Madam Chair, members of the boards, with that said, is the idea you would want us to then to work on some public meetings to start talking about these? Or do you want to think about it and let us circle back with you in July and see where you'd like to go? I think it will take a while to sort of get that information out and make those meetings meaningful. And I also know as soon as we put it out, we're going to have a huge contingent of those that support this project or that project. And so we just want to make sure we're all prepared for, if it's a voting thing from our residents, that those that are into, well, I won't pick the sports because those folks in those different ones will get there. But I think that's a good idea to sort of engage that. But do you want us to wait and give you a month to sort of sit on these, and then July we'll circle back on
Sure.
the schedule and how we move them forward? For us, the goal becomes melding it into our budget process. If we go to some bond referendum, you'd have some timelines on that to meet and be able to move that forward as well.
Yeah, and well, you could give us till July, and then in the meantime, you all too could be thinking about ways that we can go out to the citizens or to the board to get more prioritization. This sounds like a great project for a recently announced retirement for a soon-to-be former Parks and Rec director. I just don't know. This is just screaming. He'd be the perfect person. So, but, well, that's true. So, but I think that works.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to sort of remind ourselves about one other thing, which is that this Park and Recreation capital improvement plan and the projections for future projects that would wind up on that is, of course, very much an attractive package of ideas. But we also do have to remember there are a couple other things that we need to be thinking about, whether it's in terms of if there is a need to build a middle school and a new library facility. Now, it is the case that a while ago, probably now close to 2 decades ago, more than that, maybe more than that actually, we went to the voters and asked for approval for schools, parks, and library. Isn't that right?
Is that for War Hill, when War Hill was built?
I'm trying to think, when was the county, I think it was for the county library, among other things.
Long time ago.
Yeah,
2005, I believe.
95, I think that's about right. So I think we do need to think of this comprehensively in terms of things, and then also take into account what we think about the nature of the economy and the housing market in particular. I think it's worth having that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, that brings us to a government center update. Mr. Reinheimer has returned from the rural part of Canada to bring us an update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am back from the Great North safely. Board members, thanks for allowing me to be here today. Mr. Stevens, Mr. Kinsman, and Renee Dolman. It's good to see you there. So the last update I gave in May, it was just a couple of days before a group of us left to go to Minnesota to tour some facilities there. We have done that. I would say it was a very educational and informative visit. Dr. McGlennon, Ms. Larson came along, Mr. Stevens, and Paul Holt, and myself, along with representatives from both architectural firms and both builders. I have some pictures. I'll kind of scroll through those towards the end, each kind of with its own idea or theme that I'll kind of address in talking about this update. We also had a meeting, Mrs. Knoll and I and Mr. Stevens met with a county resident about some of his ideas and input for the new government center, which I thought went very well. Some very good discussion there. I have a meeting scheduled with the lead pastor at Williamsburg Assembly of God, which is the church directly across Long Hill Road from the proposed location of the new government center, just to kind of talk about some of their concerns. We've continued with our regular meetings. We meet bi-weekly as a working group with the builders and the architectural firms, and they had delivered to us a preliminary programming report. I think this whole process so far, I've been telling you, we've been going through this programming phase where we're really just looking at space needs, adjacencies in the building, who might go where, and things like that. So we're sort of kind of wrapping that up now. The working group and we met yesterday, and I met with Mr. Stevens this morning to kind of finalize some of those numbers, trying to consolidate some more spaces, which I think we're doing. I think we're doing it very well. You know, the space needs study came out with requests from departments of somewhere around 40 conference rooms when every department wanted what they wanted. You know, we've narrowed that down substantially now to about 15 or 16 different conference rooms that are dividable and can be used by different groups in different locations. So I think we've done a good job of that. But we're also looking at trying to shrink the building footprint down a little more with some other ideas. But you should start to see, and I say start, over the next month or two, some design ideas, some building floor plans, basic floor plans, some drawings, some sketches of what the building may look like, and certainly have meetings with you all, with employees, and again with the public on what their preferences would be and what they want the building exterior really to start to look like, because we haven't really gotten there. You know, all the pictures that I've shown and other things that I've put out in the community weren't any of ours, because we didn't really have any of those things done yet, but we should start to see that in the next couple of months. So fingers crossed on that. When I came back from Canada, when I entered the zone of data, I had a million emails, and I saw that the article on the WI Daily had appeared on the new government building, which generated quite a few comments on our webpage, which I thought was very good to see. All constructive comments, really nothing negative in there. It was good to see that people are utilizing that, and I thank the WI Daily and the Gazette both for airing those stories. Again, a reminder, the website people can go to is jamescitycountyva.gov/4082 to see the progress and to be able to fill out the form. They can also call 757-259-4004 to provide feedback, or they can send an email to jccgovcenter@jamescitycountyva.gov. And up on the screen there, you'll see some photos, and we toured 3 facilities in Minnesota, Minneapolis, Edina, and Bloomington. We took so many pictures. If anybody wants to see more of the pictures, I am happy to sit down and share more of those pictures with you. And some of the documents that we'll be receiving, including the final programming report, there was a lot more pictures in there. So you'll get to see a lot of those. I wanted to just kind of put some of these up there to kind of help me with some of the discussion and for you all to kind of see some of the things that we're looking at. So this was the facility. It's from the second floor looking down, and we toured Virginia Beach, we toured Suffolk, we toured the law enforcement center, and you know, overall, I think the group really liked the openness and the welcoming feeling of the centers, that some of the centers that we toured, and that was kind of to capture what was in this photo, where it's open to the public, where people feel welcome. They don't feel like it's a federal office building, you know, I guess is the best way to describe it. That's kind of what people are saying they don't want to see. Something that's more welcoming and open, transparency. Those are all the things we kind of want to push forward in some sort of design similar to that. Again, just pictures that we took from some of the different facilities. This one particularly because of the use of natural light. That's one of the things we heard from a lot of our employees and a lot of the folks that they like to see that natural light, that openness, and those types of things that we want to see inside our facility. This was the building in Minneapolis. Very handsome young man there on the right walking through. That's Dr. McMullen. But that facility, it was very modern. And they had a lot of really interesting ideas, interesting concepts in there. And the folks that did the tours in all three localities, but especially Minneapolis, really did a fabulous job of helping explain a lot of the things that they did, why they did it that way, which I think helped us to think of things a little bit differently and look at it a little bit differently than we had. So I think it was definitely a worthwhile trip. It's one of the other buildings that we viewed in Minnesota. Jokingly, I said that looks a lot like the back of the law enforcement center, and it does.
Yes.
But again, for a very good reason. You know, the openness, the natural light. They had an open floor plan up to the second floor, similar to the LEC, where we could have that communication between folks, so it wasn't so separated or so isolated. I just threw this one on there. This was one of the boardrooms. We saw several different boardrooms. This was a podium that could be moved up and down, which obviously would be beneficial. Another thing that we saw in several of the board meetings was a flat floor instead of the sloped floor, which is something we're certainly considering. Makes the space much more flexible, so it can be utilized for other things. You know, obviously, this is a great room. It's really great for what it is, but it's hard to do other things in this room. Having a building or a room this size that's flexible that we can use for other things in public meetings, I think might be beneficial as well. In this last photo that I have, just about every facility we toured really had a lot of focus and put a lot of time into art, local art in their facilities. This was the building in Minneapolis. On every floor, when you get off the elevator, they had some sort of art piece up on the ceiling there. And I just put one picture just to be able to talk to it. But we saw that in just about every facility. So that's something I think we will want to consider moving forward. I know in Legacy Hall, we have that artwork when you first walk in the building. But maybe talk about that a little bit more as we move forward. We don't have to do it today, obviously, or in the very near future, but at some point, just talk about that and what we want to see in that facility in regards to local art, showing the history. Obviously, we're a history-rich community, and be able to share some of that and some of the design and some of the artwork that we display in the facility. So that's why I included that slide on there. This was just a stock photo, kind of that open feeling that I talked about that we kind of want to see. And then this is an office setting, and one of the things that we've seen in almost all the sites that we visited, we got this from our employees too. Almost all of our employees want something that's open, a lot of natural light, where they don't feel confined, where there's a sense of collaboration amongst employees, but then everybody wants their own office, right? And that's a hard combination. Those two don't go together well. But we saw that in a lot of these facilities. I'm sorry, those slides went forward by themselves, where they put the offices in the center and the workstations on the outside. So they're the ones that actually have the natural light from the windows, but it comes through into the offices that are glass fronted or maybe half glass front to make it more open, to have more natural light. So those are some of the things we're going to have discussions with, especially with our department heads. In the space needs study, we have departments with, if they have 70 employees, they have 65 individual offices. That's what's currently in the study, and we're probably going to look and have some conversations with them and maybe rethink that. That was one of the big things I think we got from Minneapolis, was trying to have that cultural change in how you look at the office and how you do your work, not the typical corner office with 4 walls and a door that you can't see into. So we're going to be looking at all those things and having those conversations moving forward. But I'm excited about it. I think we're moving forward. It's been a very educational and informative process. Doing the tours, I think, has been very worthwhile. I appreciate all that you all have provided with input to the architects and everyone, but things are moving along very well right now, I would say. So happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
I know you made a mention on, bringing down some of the square footage and that sort of thing. I mean, we always look at that, and we start buildings, and next thing you know, we're bringing down square footage, and we're bringing down this, and we're bringing down that, and in 10 years, we find out that that wasn't the best decision. So I would suggest this is a one-time deal. If we do it right. If we, it's gonna cost us more today, but in the long run, it's gonna save us in the long run. We'll save a whole lot more as far as cost in 10 or 15 years. So, you know, if you're gonna be a bear, be a grizzly and put a good building up.
Understood. And, you know, the cuts that we've made in trying to get the size down have all just been in consolidation of conference-type spaces or training room spaces. We haven't cut individual department requests as far as size for offices and number of personnel they may have in the future. So we've managed to keep that up pretty good. And I'm right with you on that.
Yeah,
I don't want to build a building that the day we move in, we're out of room. So
Right.
that's not what we're trying to do.
And this will be, you know, this is our one chance to take this and do something really classy with it and make it a building of the future. And that's what we should be focused on more than anything is that the functionality, making it a good, strong building with low maintenance. And I was going to save the citizens in the long run quite a few dollars in just maintenance alone.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Anything else? Thank you all.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you for all you're putting your efforts. Appreciate it. That brings us to board considerations. We have two this afternoon. Our first is an appropriation of $498,598. Drone delivered study site agreement with Duke University. Chief Jameson is going to give our presentation. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you remember, back at the end of May, we came forward and presented you an opportunity for the county and the police department to enter into an agreement with Duke University. And today, we're here to talk about the money that they would allocate to us and how that would work. So James City County Police Department seeks authorization to enter into an agreement with Duke University to serve as a study site for the clinical research study titled Developing and Testing Drone-Delivered AEDs for Cardiac Arrest in Rural America. Duke University has secured funding from the American Heart Association to support this study through June 30th of 2027. James City County has been selected as a viable study site due to its unique population, geography, and existing drone capabilities. Under this agreement, the police department will conduct the study in strict accordance with the established protocol and all applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Financial support for the study, including an established budget and payment schedule, will be provided by Duke University. To facilitate participation in the study, Duke University will supply the necessary funding to expand the police department's drone as first responder program, and this funding covers all study-related equipment, supplies, and overhead costs such as labor, and will include reimbursement for drones, medical supplies, launch infrastructure, software, overtime, travel, and other expenses detailed in the agreement budget. The funding allocated to the county for this study totals $499,598, which is expected to be received at certain milestones during the study. Any funds advanced by Duke University unearned by the county at the end of the study will be returned to Duke University. It is recommended that the Board of Supervisors adopt the attached resolution to authorize this study site agreement and appropriate these funds into the Special Projects Grant Fund. And I have Assistant Chief Dahlman here to answer any specific questions about drones that I may not be able to, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Chief, how many localities are going to be involved in this? Is it just us, or?
It's just in the state of Virginia right now. It's just us.
Just us.
The other one they're working with is in North Carolina.
Okay. So two altogether.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I think this is terrific. A wonderful opportunity for us, and it could really potentially save lives for some of our residents with the ability to get the AEDs to people much more rapidly. And I know it will have good instructions for the person who is receiving it delivered in such a short period of time. So I really think it's great that we will be participating in this, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to let our citizens know about the kinds of innovative things that we're engaged in.
Thank you. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
bringing that forward. Appreciate that. I'll look to the board for discussion and/or a motion.
Was for approval?
Mr. Stevens?
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
That brings us to contract award, $500,000, James City County Marina upgrades and supporting infrastructure improvements, 70% design contract. Barry Moses. And there you appear to give the staff presentation. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Madam
Good.
Chair, members of the board. Excuse me. The resolution for your consideration today is the 70% design contract award to the design build team of Crofton Construction Services, Timmons Group, and Guernsey Tingle Architects in the amount of $500,000. As presented at the November 28th, 2023 board meeting, staff is moving forward with the design build process to complete the James City County Marina upgrades and infrastructure improvements. In the 70% design process, staff and the design build team will be able to work together to consider the components that are shown in the attached concept plan, which I believe Alistair had mentioned a little earlier. The infrastructure required to support the approximately 70 additional boat slips, parking, dredging, shoreline stabilization, of course, the docks themselves, lighting, landscaping, and everything. It also considers the lease of the restaurant area and the infrastructure for that, and the potential for a dry stack storage. There's also an off-site dry boat storage as part of those considerations. But as we get with the design build team, we can look at other components to consider budget and schedule as we move forward, once we get this process started. As an interim step, we included a 30% design and cost estimate. We had that initially for August of this year. We think we can bring it in September and come back for further direction. The funding for this current portion of the project, this contract award, is part of the approved CIP budget and with the funds currently in ARPA, as Mr. Eisenhower mentioned. Staff recommends approval of the resolution, and I have John Carnifax and Alistair Perkinson here if you have any questions that I can't answer.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right. I will look to the board for a discussion and or a motion.
Motion for approval?
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel? Aye. Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. That brings us to board request and directives. Ms. Knoll?
Just that I enjoyed going to the graduation for War Hill High School. I thought that was fun, good use of my time, and I just really appreciated being able to go there because it was moving. It's been so long since I graduated, so it was kind of nice to hear people speak and everybody excited. And of course, I loved seeing some of them going into the military because you know how strong I am about that. So it was a good day. Thank you. That was it.
I have a couple of things. First, I just wanted to congratulate all the high school graduates, whether they graduated from our private schools, from the three high schools, Williamsburg, James City County, Lafayette, Jamestown, and War Hill. All great ceremonies, all wonderful days, and appreciated the opportunity to spend time with some of my colleagues at those events. And while I'm talking about the high school, just very quickly to recognize and congratulate Lafayette's boys soccer team for their winning of their state title, and for the Jamestown High School Envirothon team, which was once again the state winner, and will now go on to regional, national, and international competitions, and hopefully we'll once again hear that they are the best in the world in August. In addition to that, just very quickly, wanted to say that enjoyed the ceremony put on by our county staff for Juneteenth. The county celebration was a great success, and the event grows every year, and it's just inspiring to be there. And that was at Freedom Park, and then following that, on that Saturday at Freedom Park, we had Freedom Fest in collaboration between our Parks and Recreation Department and the NAACP, and that was a tremendous first effort. Just a great day. pretty warm, but still lots of folks came out to enjoy learning more about Freedom Park and learning more about the story of the freed black settlement at Freedom Park that has such a historic significance. And then was happy to see Mr. Eisenhower along with me at the Juneteenth celebration in the city of Williamsburg last Wednesday, where there was an opportunity to celebrate the class of 1969 that integrated Williamsburg James City Schools. On the Saturday, we had Freedom Fest. We also had the Will Barnes Day sponsored by the Clean County Commission at Veterans Park, and that was once again a really nice opportunity to get together with folks to thank them for the hard work they put into keeping the county as clean as possible, an always challenging job. Also went to the dedication of the new facility for the Hampton and Peninsula Health Department in Newport News. Great facility with lots of room to grow as they moved into the former headquarters of Stratford University, I think it was, that has been converted now to their facility. And the last thing I just wanted to mention was to extend condolences on the death of Colin Campbell, who played such an important role in our general region's development, and especially for his role in the 2007 commemoration of 1607, and his strong leadership for the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation over the years. So, thank you. Sorry to take so much time. But we were all very busy, I think, in June.
I will go through very quickly because several of the things that Dr. McGlennon mentioned, the Juneteenth celebrations, I congratulate the county staff, our Black History Committee for really putting on a superb program. I did have one ribbon cutting in my district. For those who had heard, the school crossing had closed. It's reopened under new management, and they're fellow residents in Ford's Colony, and they're reopened for business, and my daughter's already been overspending some money. So. The Juneteenth at Freedom Park on the Saturday that was helped between the NAACP and the county Parks and Rec was phenomenal. My kudos to Parks and Rec for really making it great for them. In speaking to our folks from the NAACP, I understand they had over 700 people, which is the largest group that they've ever had. I think it'll grow as we go forward. I did have one aside that I want to mention. I went to one little tent where there was a chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. And there were two young, I say young, they're younger, a little bit younger than I am, maybe the same age, gentlemen there who were telling us about this chapter, which is in Petersburg, and it's named after their father. Here's Howard Baugh, who was one of the Tuskegee Airmen who flew 135 combat missions in Europe, 1.5 aerial victories, Distinguished Flying Cross Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, and quite a distinguished career. So it's named after their father, or the chapter. And one of the gentlemen I spoke to, we started exchanging stories as we aviators tend to do. And it turns out he was United States Air Force. He was a tanker driver. And at the same time, I was in Vietnam, and so I said, he's probably refueled me several times. And found out he went on to be an airline pilot for United Airlines. So he's just retired, or he retired several years ago, sort of like I did from that. But it's a small world. But I was really, really impressed with the number of different booths and tents and organizations related with the Juneteenth that were out there. But this one was very impressive. I felt I had to mention that. I will say one other thing, and that is that I have been asked by the Sons of the American Revolution, of whom I'm a member, to speak at Freedom Park on this Saturday, the 29th at 11 a.m. They are doing a program in commemoration of, and I'll pull it up here real quick, of the James City County Resolves, which were passed the 1st of July, 1774. And they were at a place called Isham's Isham Allen's Ordinary, near where modern Lightfoot Shopping Center and the Wawa gas station are. So that's where they were actually done in 1774. The ceremony will be at Freedom Park, and it will commemorate the resolves which banned all trade with England and was passed in support of Boston following the punitive reactions taken by the Crown subsequent to the Boston's Tea Party. So it's a very historic event, and I'm very pleased to be there. This will be part of the 250th celebration of the American Revolution event. So I just wanted to, that was it.
Thank you. Just quick addition. I do want to remind people that on Wednesdays, is it every Wednesday? How often is it, Jim, that we're on WMBG? Is it once
It's
a
every other
month?
week.
Every other week?
Every other week.
Okay.
And I'm
Which-
on tomorrow.
So there you go. You have a chance to listen to Supervisor Eisenhower about 5:15, anywhere between 5 and 5:30. But they give us an opportunity to come on, share about what's going on in the county. I need to thank Renee Dahlman because I usually give her about, an hour's notice. Can you give me some information? Just because I don't want to miss anything. So I really appreciate you helping me out there all the time. But I do also want to thank them because they have us, they have the city council, and it's just it's a great public service to let people know what's going on. Supervisor McGlennon and I also had the school liaison meeting, which was a very frank conversation with our colleagues from the city and school board, and Mr. Stevens attended that as well. And I do want to bring up one other thing about the Freedom Fest that's very important to me to bring up because it was the first time we were doing it. It was hot. I had such a great time. I bought popcorn, I bought lemonade, I learned, I got educated about things, I met people from the community. We had one of our local dentists here wrote a book. We had members of Human Services out there. We had the bookmobile. We had the NAACP that was hosting. It was just tremendous. But the one thing, I sent Mr. Stevens and Mr. Carnifax a note when I left because Parks and Rec staff, James City County staff that was out there, everybody was just pleasant from the word go. And if you're going to be in a bad mood, it's on a day when you're really hot and people can be short-tempered because parking was a little bit of an issue. But I believe there was a local church that stepped in to help with some everybody just pulled together. It just was tremendous. And I just really want to say how much I appreciate it because I thought it was a great event. And same goes for the Clean County Commission. They did a wonderful peg, did a great job. Food was delicious. 2 drummers catered that. It was really it was a couple of days there with graduation and all of this, and then what had been done out at Freedom Park with the employees for Juneteenth. It just, makes you really proud of where you live and grateful. And the morning of the employee Juneteenth, I had gotten the honor of going out and welcoming our new employees, which was a full room, and appreciate all the work that HR does for that. Stephanie did a great job. She did a great icebreaker. Adam, would you like to tell us about the icebreaker? Okay. Okay. I know you did. Yep. But it was a very good one. But yeah, Adam, he didn't feel like participating that day. No. I'm just teasing you, Adam. You did a great job. But anyway, it's just been a busy few weeks around this joint. So thanks to everybody that has played a role. So I won't skip the report of the county administrator this time.
Well, thank you. I don't have a report this afternoon.
Oh,
Thanks for
okay.
asking.
Okay.
We
Good
could have
job.
skipped it.
All right. With that, I will need a motion to enter closed session for the
Madam
following
Chair, can I
item.
ask if we
Oh.
could take a recess for a couple of minutes before we go into closed session?
You want to take it now?
Yeah. just
Sure.
so- I know
We'll
at
be in
one
recess.
point we were told that we shouldn't go into closed it shouldn't
Break
break.
forward.
Oh, I did not
after we
know
got
that.
into closed session. But
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, we're in recess now. call us back into session. May I now have a motion to enter closed session for the following items? Discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose or of the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia, and regarding the property identified as 110 Nina Lane and a parcel of property along Brickbat Road. 2, consideration of a personnel matter, appointment of individuals to the Historical Commission, and the performance evaluation of the county administrator and a county attorney pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Did we do,
We're in closed session.
did we do brickbat?
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
added.
she had
Call us out of closed session. May I have a motion to certify?
Madam Chair, I move to certify that we only spoke about those items we indicated we would speak about going into closed session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stevens.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower? Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Okay, I move that we appoint to the Historical Commission to be a reappointment of Mr. Fred Bolt for a term of 3 years that expires on June 30th, 2027, and that we have a new member, Mr. Stephen Williams, appointed to a 3-year term also expiring on June 30th, 2027.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan? Aye. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, and you want to do these two separately, or do we do it all on a one motion? Can we?
Yes, I
Okay.
think.
And we do a motion that we, after the evaluations, we increase the base salary for the county administrator to $240,000 and the county attorney to $210,000.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, with that, we will adjourn until, or a motion to adjourn, please, to, till 5 PM on July 9th, 2024. Ms. Knoll has moved the motion.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Hippel? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower? Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Can't get any better than that. Motion